And I know a bit more about this case because I watched the interview of the woman who brought forth the allegation. She said that they're on a Navy ship in the 90s. So I think believe in 1991, if I'm not mistaken. It's like 3 decades ago, and that the woman's role, she her job consisted of uh, waking up people to assume their shift. Like whether it's at night or during the day, and that the like Vice Admiral Edmund Edmondson started behaving in inappropriate way, as well as she would come to wake him up. He he started showing more and more of his skin to and to some point it came to the point that he would lie down naked when she comes to wake him up, and then the woman in question was shocked about his behavior, and like I believe a few days later, he called her to his office, and she believed he was calling her to apologize, but instead he when the woman got to to the office, he assaulted her again, and he basically raped her. So like, and there is also an allegation against the former military operations commander, Lieutenant General Christopher Coates, and who was also retiring after there was a report that said that he had an affair, and an inappropriate affair while serving in the military. There's another, there's just so many of these. There's another allegation against Major General Peter Dahl, who's the former commander of the special forces, and he was put on paid leave. And not too while ago, the Global News reported that the commander of military intelligence school, Lieutenant Colonel Raphael Gouet, I don't know if I have his name right, uh, has also been temporarily removed because of another investigation. So it just runs deep. Like there are so many of these. Like when, as I said before, when like I was loosely following this story. I thought it was just about Vance, the former defense staff, Vance. But there are just so many of these stories, and it just shows that, like, the Canadian Armed Forces um really need a serious reckoning, and they really need to work on this, and not just go on some PR stunt, but really, really address these issues.
And one of the worst parts about this is that actually Kelly Brandon, she shared her sexual assault past with General Vance, and then General Vance told her to participate in a class action. There was a class action lawsuit or whatever, and Kelly Brandon talked a bit about this in the interview, but she was like, she was feeling like a form about it, and I guess it stated like different incidents of what is considered sexual misconduct or whatever. She was just filling it out, and I think she was only at half of the years of her service, and she already reached 63 names, 63 different incidents of sexual assault, like all these moments, and it just shows that it's a very real culture problem. And one of the things also, like the other side of it, which we kind of touched on a bit about, is that the justice system that in the military does not do anything to help the situation. In fact, they're part of the problem as well, because once once a person gets reports this to their chain of command, and then let's say they actually do start investigating it in their internal justice system, and after, if there's a clause in there where the accused can plead down. So you plead guilty, and then you actually receive like a lesser sentence. So a lot of these people that were accused would actually plead down to lesser consequences, and basically would get off with basically a slap in the wrist. And I believe it was General Vance that he had I think it was a committee back in the day where he talked about the successes of Operations Honor, and he's like, we have a conviction rate of 87%. That's what he said. And I was listening to this other lawyer that was like, the conviction rate is really more like 14%. If he's saying 87%, it probably means that he's counting all the people that actually pleaded down their cases. So they got a slap on the wrist, they somewhat plead guilty or whatever, but the victims aren't vindicated by the consequences given to their abusers. So it back to the point of having an independent reporting system. That's a thing that has to be addressed, because there's a difference between also like criminal offenses and military offenses. So military offenses are like disciplinary stuff, right? And this is what those people would plead down to. They would plead down to getting consequences that you would give to somebody that had military offenses, like just disciplinary stuff. They would plead down from a criminal charge to a disciplinary charge, which is, if you think about it, is very insane. You can't have the two different things. So it comes to the point now where like the advocates are pleading to have like a civilian justice system take over, an outside system take over, so they can actually start handling this. Forgot what was the name of the woman that had her. She actually reported it again to the internal military system, and then her case never got resolved because they lost the evidence. They lost the evidence of her. They lost her original statement. So she never. And the military was like, "Yo, if we don't have the original statement, we can't prosecute your accuser." I wish I had her name, but it's stuff like that shows a systematic issue. And I was just reading that the military somewhat feels vindicated by the fact that this report that just came out, like Fisher's report that just came out, didn't explicitly say it's a systematic issue. They feel somewhat vindicated by that, but the fact that you would feel vindicated by that is it's a problem to begin. Again, this is just reported, but it's one of those things you really really think about, like how much the system kind of fails a lot of the victims as well.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of these uh, systemic problems in the institution. You just talked about, like you talked before about the process that the victims have to go through, and in order to report uh, these sexual misconducts, and how those aren't adequate. And there's also another issue is that the mil- the military police investigators is composed of less than a quarter of those military police investigators are women. And that number is much much lower than what is found in the Canadian civilian police force. So there are just a lot of these systemic failures when it comes to this issue, and this is not constrained to the military. Like oftentimes when there are these issues of sexual misconduct in institutions, when like if you dig deep, you find that there are a lot of just it's just the system in itself is set up not to catch these issues. I was reading an op-ed by a former colleague, a coworker of mine, and she was talking about uh, she was talking about sexual misconduct and the system of fighting sexual misconduct in Canadian universities. And more specifically, she was talking about her alma mater, and like one of the things that stuck up that I remembered is that, like, if you look at the basically the leadership of these institutions, and specifically of the, I don't know if there are committees or basically the bodies that are in charge of dealing with these issues, oftentimes it's composed by like men, all over. Like for that specific university, it was like over 90%. So if you just have a system like that where you have an environment of, like, as you said, like people say it's like it's a boys culture, and then like if you have like a misog- like a misogynist environment, and it's been perpetrated by men in leadership and men up and down, you know the institution leadership. So if you create these bodies to remedy these issues, and you don't make an effort to have women on there, or the people who would be concerned about this issue, who would be affected by these issues, like, what exactly are you doing? And this applies to the Canadian military.
And I just will harp back to actually what I heard from Eleanor Taylor. She was a high ranking officer in the military, but she resigned most recently. She's like a very decorated soldier, like one of the best of the best. But she resigned recently and said that the military can't fix itself. Like there needs to be like independent sources that actually come in and try to fix it, because we've seen the military already try to fix itself, and it clearly hasn't worked. And back to on your point as well, like I was listening to the story of Emily Tulloch. She testified in front of, I believe, the House committee, and she talked about her story about getting raped, and then just the aftermath of the military investigation. She said everybody that interviewed her were all men, and in the second interview that she had, she walked out because she was just like, they weren't they had no empathy or anything. It was more like, okay, we're here, let's do our job, let's write down her report and let's move on. And it comes back to your point of like, you have some people that just don't care, that are in there that don't care. Either they don't care because they do it, or they don't care because they don't care. They have zero empathy.